Hi, Charlie Badnap here. What you'll be watching today is a Seishindo coaching session based largely on the Aikido principle of non-dissension. Stick around, have a listen and watch, and I think you'll find a process that's effective and solution-oriented. Hello, this is Charlie, as most everybody watching this will know, and I've developed a human potential discipline called Seishindo. And a few of the things it's based upon, one is that this entire unit of self has intelligence. And a lot of coaching or therapy or just in our everyday life, I think we get confused and think that we are our thoughts and our beliefs, and actually we're much more than that. And certainly in regard to how we feel, all of the serotonin that the body makes and all of the antidepressants are all about serotonin, the antidepressants that people take, all of the serotonin is produced by the enteric nervous system without any input from the brain and the head. And this is very much in line with Japanese thinking. I was in Japan for 30 years and a professional Aikido teacher for 20 of those years. And of course, they didn't know about serotonin in those days, but they said, pay attention to the intelligence in your gut. In Japanese, it's called the 1 point. And in Aikido, we're learning to pay attention to the intelligence in the gut. And we're learning, I would like to say, to breathe, to think with your breath. And part of what that means for me is that when you get a little nervous, your breathing restricts, and normally we don't notice it. But when we do notice it, we can breathe more expansively and we're more solution oriented. So I'm going to work with Vaughn today. Vaughn and I know each other for a few years. Interesting that, just before I met my wife is when we met. He told me just a few minutes ago. And in this coaching, it'll, I think, look a little different than what you might be used to if you've seen other people get coached or if you've been coached yourself. And the idea is really about, I'm just looking and seeing, here's another attendant. It's really about tuning into yourself, becoming more mindful, breathing more, and from this, what I would call slower space, we have access to information that's different than if we're at our more usual, what my friend Dan used to call our chipmunk pace. And, for me, like, it's interesting, I was looking for an electrical device the other day, and I really needed it. And I'm looking around literally like this, and I couldn't find it. And I actually went out. It's inexpensive. It's one of the things you can plug 4 or 5 sockets into. And I couldn't find it. And I went and bought one because I really needed it, like in an hour or so. Came back, went to plug it in, looked down over here, and the exact device that I was looking for was sitting on top of this low table that I have. So when we get nervous, we usually limit actually what we're able to pay attention to. And when we limit what we're able to pay attention to, we don't have as much information that we can get. So in a moment, I'm going to ask Vaughn what he'd like to work on today. And what we're going to be doing, Vaughn knows this to a fair extent, is rather than attempting to get to an answer, we're going to attempt to slow the whole system down, to realize that each person is more than what they're thinking. Vaughn is more than what he's thinking. And we're going to see if Vaughn doesn't perhaps come up with some information that he hasn't quite been, it's been passing him by and he hasn't really been noticing. So, hi Vaughn, please tell us what you'd like to get coached on today.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Charlie. To tell the brief story, I bought this big house in downtown Madison, Wisconsin 20 years ago. And I started working on it right away. It was a big fixer-upper. And I did some big stuff on the outside with permits, and then I did a whole bunch of work inside without permits. And I made a dream space up in the attic, and I had a bunch of nice people living here as a multi-unit. And things were really going well. I felt like I just hit my stride about a year ago, where there was income flowing through it. Everyone living here was really happy. We had a great community of friends in different flats. And I live here with my family in the first floor flat now. And things were just feeling so good. And then a girlfriend of a tenant called building inspection about me painting outside. So I had a complaint. Building inspection ordered a big review of the property I've been working on for these 2 decades, which is kind of a big part of my identity. Big labor of love, I would dare say. And they determined in the new gentrifying downtown city of Madison where I live that I had broken some of their rules, and they came down on me really, really hard. So I had to actually tear out close to 2,000 square feet of work that I did with my own 2 hands, and my wife and I tiled it and painted it and made it really custom and really gorgeous. So that hurt a lot, and it was quite costly. And that was about a year ago. So I've been processing this and following through with these municipal violation orders. And just on Wednesday, I got the final, after I finished tearing out all this really nice finished space, I got the final charge from the city's attorney, and they issued a citation for $11,000. And all these 20 years before this going down, I felt really proud of my work. I got a lot of positive feedback. I lived in different parts of the house and shared a lot of good times here. And now I've come to this weird spot where I'm really kind of bummed out about maybe the time I wasted all those years doing that work, because now I had to tear it out. And then also kind of feeling like I made some bad choices. I've always been a little bit free thinking and creative in my approach to things, and I kind of believed that maybe forgiveness was easier than permission. And now I'm really questioning that belief and questioning myself, and feeling kind of sad that I guess got caught and had to go through this process. So I took a big financial loss. It's been kind of emotional, and I'm feeling kind of bummed out about the whole, I got smacked down by the system. So,
okay. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, I won't be able to, I don't have any pull with the city where you live, and already you spent all the money and everything. So then we're wondering, what can we do to help Vaughn today? And what was the one phrase you said is forgiveness rather than permission?
Yes. I got no forgiveness on this one, but I didn't ask permission in the first place. So there I stand in this kind of dilemma state of trying to reconcile my past belief structure of being creative and trying things and being kind of bold, and now feeling like, I made a mistake and I should have played their game instead of mine.
Okay. So take a deep breath, please. And again, we're just going to look to find some information that maybe has eluded Vaughn so far. We're not looking for right or wrong. And let's just see what happens. So tell me if I'm correct. When you started all of the work that you did, or at some point in all of the work that you did, you knew you weren't adhering to the city rules. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, there were things I chose to ignore. Yes.
Okay. And the things that you chose to ignore, unfortunately, came back to bite you.
Exactly.
And you said something about I was feeling proud, but now, what was that?
Just kind of a deep questioning of myself and feeling let down by my own decision process, I guess. Um, I used to be really excited about the work I'd done here, and now I feel like it was a big mistake.
Okay, take a deep breath. And we've all at least made mistakes in our lives, and chances are all of us have made some big mistakes in our life. And then it becomes partially a task, I think, of loving ourselves, having realized, oh my God, that was kind of a stupid thing to do. So let me ask you, Vaughn, how you work as some form of, is it right to say consultant, or what would the term that you would use?
Yeah, I have two jobs. I work in state government in mental health policy and administration, and then I do training facilitation as an independent consultant for human services professionals. I teach them de-escalation and conflict resolution skills, a bit of centering and
Okay.
problem solving.
And do you have some sort of set of rules when you're doing that work?
You mean the private work, the training work?
Okay, let's say the private work, the training work.
Yeah, there's a few rules. I'm an independent consultant in that role, so I have to respect people and follow, cultural, social boundaries, but I also like challenge people and get them to think deeply about some of their beliefs and their process.
Okay, and the challenging part, what does that look like to you? How do you go about challenging people?
Well, I use exercises, experiential exercises from that I learned through Aikido practice. I have people explore a relationship and violating the experience of being in relationship. So, for example, one of my favorite exercises is I have one person play the role of the helpful caregiver, and they offer and to pretend they're meeting someone for the first time, and they offer to shake hands with the person and they introduce themselves. And then the confederate or their practice partner is instructed privately to not take the handshake, but rather to be intimidating and grab the person's wrist or arm and stare them in the eye.
Okay, and tell me how, if at all, what you just mentioned as this exercise relates to your relationship with the city government.
Yeah, I feel like I was operating in a good intent of wanting to fix an old house and make it nice, and thinking that once they saw how nice it was someday, maybe they'd just say, that's great, it's done. And now I feel like they've got me by the neck, and they're squeezing some of the life out of me.
And so in your relationship with the government, are you the first person, or in the exercise, are you or are you with the person that grabs the person by the arm and tries to do something with them?
I perceive myself as the helpful person who's not trying to fight, um, and I perceive them as being the aggressor.
Okay, take a deep breath. So it's very interesting, and of course, as you know, and most people know, but maybe, for instance, not Ian, because he hasn't known about this work before, is that I was a professional Aikido teacher for a number of years in Japan. And we have the idea in Aikido that within reason, we let the other person do what he wants, he or she wants to do, and we do our best to not impede their movement while still maintaining ourselves. So not that somebody pushes me onto the railroad tracks or something because I'm totally passive, but when they go to push, I just keep moving and they don't have anything to push against. So we feel that we're not the aggressor. and you've studied a good deal of Aikido, and you feel like you're getting aggressed by the government,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you're the one that started the whole ball rolling. So I'm a rule breaker for sure. And I've had my own businesses my entire life, ever since I was 14 and started a paper route.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say part of the reason I was able to make a reasonable living is that I was a rule breaker.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a rule breaker, it seems, yeah?
Yeah, I try. I tend to follow my own rhythm and do my own
Thing. And sometimes you're not paying enough attention to the people in your surroundings, huh?
Yeah, there are times when my enthusiasm might override my sensitivity.
Okay, good. Happens to me quite often. In fact, that's been one of the issues I've looked at my whole life. Like some people will say, oh, Charlie's so great, he's an amazing storyteller and such. And other people say, and he never shuts up. And I'm enjoying my story. I think that most of the other people seem to be enjoying my story, but actually it turns out that some people say, when is it somebody else's turn except Charlie's? So if we consider ourselves creative, which I do consider myself creative, you said you consider yourself creative.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain enthusiasm that sometimes leads us to block out the feelings and opinions of others.
Mm-hmm.
And seems like to some extent that's what you did.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So how could you have done your space very differently? And just in general terms, we don't want to know about all of the different regulations and so forth. How could you have done it differently?
If I had begun with greater transparency and gone slower and followed the rules, I would have progressed more slowly in the renovation work, and it wouldn't have turned out as creative, perhaps, because there are lots of rules that I would have had to follow the first time. So I guess I would have had to be more patient and compliant.
Okay, good. Good that you recognize that. And how are you in general with patience and compliance?
I burn pretty quick, pretty hot. I think I value those things, but those are things I'm working on. I think, to share a quick moment of reflection, I remember a third or fourth grade teacher who took my parents aside when I was a boy and said, he thinks he can make his own rules, and that's going to get him in trouble someday. And I think that personality observation is still true to this day.
Yeah, let's just stop there for a second, because that I think is a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah.
And I like to say that we're all perfectly imperfect,
Mm-hmm.
which means we have our own way of living in the world, and no two people are the same. And wow, even how old were you?
That was probably 9 years old, 8 years old, maybe.
Even 9 years old, maybe you had a particularly prescient teacher, but in a way she was seemingly, although she had no idea, I'm guessing, was forecasting this difficulty that you wound up having with the city government.
Yeah, I would say so.
So a tough pill to swallow, as the expression goes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering, and it could have been worse.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know in New York City, the building code, at least it used to be, is quite strict.
Mm-hmm.
And this will normally happen with people building a commercial establishment like a restaurant or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have the proper sprinkler system, or there's anyway, many regulations. And at some point, sometimes they have to close down the entire restaurant for good because they can't afford to completely gut the space and start over again.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the positively oriented lesson you're in the process of getting from this experience, Fawn?
Well, on a personal level, it's taught me a lot about humility and to slow down and accept that there are other forces at play other than my own vision. And then in terms of perspective taking, something really terrible could have happened, like a fire or, a tragic outcome that could have created all kinds of liability and loss in my situation before I was discovered with this loft apartment and all that. So, I keep perspective that it could have been worse. And then also there were about 12 or 15 years where I profited through my work.
Yes.
By having more space and more rental income.
Yes.
So I didn't lose everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you took quite a risk. And yeah, if there had been a fire and someone had been killed, and then it was, boom, 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 boy, you could have been really almost your whole life, huh?
Yeah, it could have been a far greater hit. Yeah.
And what's your idea of where or how you're focusing to not notice that risk?
At this point in time or prior to the
Prior
awakening?
to the government stepping in.
I think I was somewhat delusional in that I just thought it would be fine.
Yeah, it would be fine.
Yeah. I mean, it was really nice, and it just wasn't stamped and approved. And
yeah, so you were somehow ignoring a fair amount of what was going on around you, huh?
yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I was pretending it wasn't my reality.
Yes, pretending.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the government steps in, you're no longer able to pretend.
That's right.
So lots and lots and lots of ifs in life, and we don't get any clear do-overs.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a lot of ifs or what ifs. What if I had gone to the left instead of to the right? And partially, I think it's very important to continue to love and respect ourselves when certain events happen. So to be able to say, would have been much better if I did X, but you know what? I did Y. And not only did I do Y, but my fourth grade teacher was attempting to get me to understand that I've been doing this pretty much my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing a lot of things that work in your life. That's absolutely, I'm sure about that. And I could ask you questions and you'd say bing, bing, bing. And it would be like, wow, that's really great. So we don't want to forget any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And in regard to what your third grade or fourth grade teacher was saying, that's been a habit that hasn't served you all that well. Would you name that habit now, please?
Independent thinking, but that sounds almost too strengths-based for what I've come to terms with. Rugged individualism. That still sounds too grand. I guess free thinking is another way of trying to capture it.
Well, using your own terminology, and I'm really impressed with that you're able to say what you're saying, which is free thinking still seems, using your language, a little bit too grand.
Yeah.
So let's
outlaw. How about outlaw consciousness? That still sounds a little sexy, doesn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's really excellent that you're able to come up with some of these ideas, and you're in a pretty good state. But you haven't stated it in a way that is an aha for me yet. So let's continue to try, please.
Try and name it. Okay. Renegade behavior.
Okay.
A
little bit of the Hell's Angels factor.
Yeah, there's some of that in my blood for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things, again, having had my own businesses my whole life and figuring things out on the fly, is that the more eccentric you are, meaning away from the center, the more you're not going to, this is my experience, the more eccentric I am, and I can call it creative, I can call it even forward thinking, whatever, the more any number of people around me don't feel comfortable because I'm displaying behavior that's very different than theirs. So one of the things that I have discovered in my own life is, like everyone else, I wanted to be loved and accepted. But I wanted that to happen on my terms. And my experience now is that if people are going to really love and accept you, they need to do it on their terms. So I think there's been a part of me non-verbally, I've never said this, well, I don't know, never, but for the most part, I've never said this to anyone, is that my way is better, my way is more creative, my way is X, Y, and Z better than yours. But by the way, I'd really deeply like you to love and respect me. And strangely enough, I found out that didn't get me the results that I really wanted in life. And part of it for me, I think, is similar to you, is that I could have slowed down. I could have taken in more of the overall picture. I could have realized that my take on reality is actually not at all reality. My subjective reality is very different from objective reality. And I think that's basically true for everyone. And then I think we'll do well to ask ourselves, what's the potential downside if I go with my subjective reality rather than objective reality? So I think you didn't happen to ask yourself what the downside was. And unfortunately, you really wound up finding out. So what are the general life lessons you're learning from this? And when I say life lessons, I mean something that's positively oriented.
I'd say what seems like a good idea in your early 20s might not be fully thought through, and beginning a course of action that's sort of personally oriented and maybe even self-involved might feel exciting and okay, but the lessons of maturity and the process of time might show otherwise.
Okay, so good, excellent again. So being that you have learned a lot since your 20s, like we all have, make the statement from today about what you've learned. You kind of went back to the being in your 20s. Make the statement from today, please.
We need to accept there are rules in life.
Excuse me, say it again.
We need to respect that there are rules in life.
And who is we?
Me, actually. I think anyone, but my lesson is I need to accept and respect the rules.
Please, as an I or a me?
I need to respect the rules.
Okay. Okay, and why is it that you need to respect the rules?
Because going backwards is inefficient and sort of depressing. Having to undo things.
Okay, is it
Mm-hmm.
is it a little bit clearer? Might be it's good to accept the rules to a fair extent, because otherwise I'm likely to just wind up having trouble after the fact.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it.
Okay, so can you say something vaguely like that, please?
It's good to accept the rules and follow them, because there can be consequences later on.
Yeah, there could be serious consequences, correct?
Yeah.
So that I think it's important for us to a little bit separate out creativity and forward thinking and stuff from following the rules and other procedures, so they don't get all mixed together and we don't wind up saying, well, I'm not following the rules because I'm creative, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And as onerous as the rules can be at times, almost everywhere, like I'll tell you a location that I have a lot of difficulty, well, not a lot of difficulty, but is annoying to me these days, is going through security checks in the airport.
Yeah. I feel the same.
I've been stripped of almost everything. My nail clippers,
Mm-hmm.
I have these little scissors with the blade about this big, about 1.5 inches big, and for clipping some hair on my face and stuff, they took that away. But you know, I take a deep breath and just, you know, do my best to pay attention. And so we've got some questions here, and I'm not going to answer them at the moment. I'm just noticing them for the first time, actually. And thank you for the people that have left questions so far. So okay, let's please make an overarching statement, Vaughn, about what you've learned from this experience.
The experience in the last 30 minutes? Or
the experience with the House and the government.
Mm-hmm. I can't just do whatever I want.
Okay. Because?
because there are consequences that can catch up with you.
That can catch up with
Or
me.
with me, yeah. There are consequences that may catch up with me,
Okay,
and they can be very serious.
so that's pretty good, and I can't just do what I want because there's consequences that'll catch up with me. So that's
Mm-hmm.
reasonably clear, and yet it's still stated in the way that I think a bit towards the negative.
Yeah.
So how could you make that same basic statement, but focusing on the positive aspects of things?
Okay. If I slow down and stay mindful of the rules, I'll be in a better position later.
Okay, take a deep breath. And let's bring it into the present. Even if this might be a little bit ahead of what you're currently feeling, it might not be, but just I'm following the rules in general and things are going really well. How about that?
Yeah, I've turned a new leaf and I'm following the rules and I'm starting to make some headway and things are getting better.
Yeah, take a deep breath and then make that same basic statement again, Vaughn.
I've slowed down a bit and I'm following the rules and I'm making some progress.
And how does it feel to be making some progress?
Affirming, and it's difficult work, but I do feel it's stable. That
I am stable?
it by following the process now that I've been rebuilding things with permits and inspections. Every time I get their little card, they give you a little card that checking it, and they sign it when they come to your job site and see something. Every time I get one of those, I feel like this is now a forever project. This is something that's built to last.
Yeah, and how does that feel? Building something to last.
Really good.
Really good. So
Really good.
take a deep breath and feel that really goodness. And I think we started this conversation with you saying, I'm having a good deal of difficulty accepting what's happened to me, something like that.
Yes.
And how do you feel now in regard to accepting what's happened to you?
I feel the victories are more meaningful. The small victories I've collected over the last year of this process are feeling more valuable and they're more prominent in my mind and in the way I feel about it.
Good. So in general, if I'm correct, and if not, do correct me, is that you're feeling more at ease with what took place.
Yes.
And that is more or less what you wanted to accomplish in talking with me today anyway?
Yeah, I'd like to forgive myself and let go of some of the second guessing and move ahead in a positive way.
Okay, so we could go further and also talk about forgiving yourself, which I think is an important thing to do. And maybe we'll do a little bit of that before we stop completely today. But you're feeling better in regard to the whole process, right?
Yes.
So we've done a pretty good job of accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish today.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. Yeah, it was nice the way you shared some of your experience as well, and it kind of made me feel, or I felt less alone.
Great, that's
and
important.
and then more positively oriented towards what is my personality and how I can stay me, but also not get in trouble.
Yes. Good. So let's look at some of these questions. I will look at some of the questions. They're not on your screen. Okay, so that was a question from a statement from a friend about running the platform. Okay, so Lawrence, are you still here? Lawrence.
Can you hear me?
Still here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So, what did you say? I love that. What is it that you loved?
When he was talking before, just one of the realizations of realizing that like he was breaking the rules and basically now he has to pay the piper sort of for it, I guess.
And what was it about that you loved?
It was just interesting seeing the realization come over his face of recognizing that he had to do the right thing.
That it was necessary for him to do the right thing.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then you made a comment about how about ignoring the rules with a question mark? What did you mean?
Well, that was just like him. He was basically like flaunting. Well, maybe not flaunting is maybe too big a word, but he was just sort of like, well, I was doing my own thing, and I was, he was just doing whatever he wanted to do without any consequences, realizing that.
Yeah, so I think there's this important thing about respecting laws, like don't drink and drive and so
Right.
on and so on. And for instance, in that regard, I've heard a lot of people over the course of my 70 years say, okay, the rule is X% of alcohol, but I've driven with 3 times more alcohol in me and I can still drive fine.
Right.
And then worst case scenario, they get in a bad accident, but less worst case scenario, they get arrested. And all of a sudden they realize, you know what? You got to follow the rules. So then at the other end of the spectrum, there's being a rule breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've said, I've done a fair amount of that. And that's part of what led me to be successful in various markets. I took a certain guerrilla approach that was legal, but I did things completely different than my competitors. And that's what made me able, with a limited amount of money, to be successful. And in fact, there's some jobs like in Silicon Valley in which you're actually encouraged to, in quotes, break things.
Mm-hmm.
And break things, I think nowadays, there's this term hacking your health, hacking your sexuality, whatever hacking. So in certain jobs, people are encouraged to break things, but not in such a way. And of course, we're not talking about throwing their computer on the floor when they get upset, but coming up with a truly new paradigm. So I think Vaughan has the capacity for that. But if at the same time we're breaking the law while we're setting that new paradigm, then we get ourselves in big trouble. And that's why I was saying I think we need to separate out being creative and or rule breaker from the line of actually not doing things legally.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think a good business example of that would be like Uber.
Okay. Yes. Uber.
I think that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They went through the same sort of thing of they tried to do everything their own way and did a lot of things that weren't really kosher, so it caught up with them, and now the company's readjusting, changing, adapting. They've had to stay in business. So
yeah, and that happens a lot in the quote unquote sharing economy. So certainly Airbnb has skirted the laws and the rules in many cities and many countries. And then they got so big so quickly that they were able to keep the government at bay, various governments at bay, as they started changing what they're doing to come more in line with the rules of different governments. And to some extent, some governments have changed their rules. So if perhaps Vaughan had built something that was housing like 1,000 people, and he had a couple of lawyers on his payroll, he might have been able to dance in a certain way to get up to speed with the laws without having to redo everything. But he wasn't housing 1,000 people, and he didn't have any lawyers on his payroll, and he was breaking the law, and he found out, boy, there was a consequence. But again, it could have been a lot worse. Thank God nobody got hurt or killed or whatever. So, Lawrence, if you don't mind me asking, and only if it's totally okay with you, what have you learned today listening to this conversation between Vaughn and I?
I mean, I've learned my own lessons as well, because I worked for one of those companies, a startup sort of company, and I got let go by them, actually. So I've been unemployed and looking for work for a number of months now.
Okay.
So I know about, I understand about trying to fit in and do all those things like he was saying.
Okay. So if you could make it a little bit clearer just for me. So what have you learned today?
I think it's good to follow the rules but I think some of the things that have applied to me is I was maybe too good at following the rules, and so I have to go outside of my comfort zone a little bit to figure out what I need to do to move forward.
Good. So. That's a great balancing statement to what Vaughn was saying, I think. And neither one of you are right, and neither one of you are wrong in an all or nothing sense. So to an extent, you're saying I was playing a bit too conservatively, and I could have at least bent a few more rules or something, and that would have helped me to be more successful. Whereas Vaughn said, on some level, I just didn't really care, so I broke whatever rules made it convenient for me, and I need to not do that like that anymore.
Yeah.
So, and Vaughn's laughing. That's good. Who thought he'd be laughing appreciatively in talking about this topic, which is, again, a big accomplishment. What I call level 1 learning is not that you don't wait until you get this whole complex situation totally understood. It's that you change your emotional response to the situation. So in hearing from Lawrence, who has a different way of being in the world than Vaughn, and then me interacting a little bit, Vaughn chuckles and he's nodding his head yes right now, and he's learning something and feeling better about himself. And that's great. The fact that Vaughn did what he did, and Lawrence, you do what you do, and I do what I do, it doesn't take away from who we are as human beings. Now, if we did something horrendous, like kill someone because we were in a bad mood, that's a bit different, but we're not talking about that. So when we break the rules of the law a little bit or this or that, it doesn't take away from who we really are in our essence. So I just suggest for everyone listening, you just take a deep breath and somehow get a little feeling of your essence. Your essence isn't the bad boy or the renegade or the, biker guy or whatever, or your essence, Lawrence, is not X, Y, and Z. Your essence is who you are prior to those events happening, and after those events happen, and actually forevermore as long as you're living. And the more we're able to tap into our essence, the better emotional quality we have to our life, and I think the better we do at living our lives. Okay, Tony'd like to make a comment, and I'd love to hear from Tony.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, you know, this reminds me of when I first went to Japan, there was a speaker that talked about the BMWs that the Japanese follow when they interact with other people. So the BMWs is ba, ma, and wa.
Okay.
Ba means basho, or the place. Ma is space, or this between the people.
Yes.
And wa means harmony. So for example.
One second. It's great. Because this is all new for people. So BMW, B is basho.
Yep.
Means location.
Or just ba. Yeah. Ba. And ma is space. The space between the atmosphere, the space between people, the relationship.
Yes. And
then wa is harmony. Make sure you're always harmonizing with others.
Okay, great.
Okay. So to give an example of that, in a Japanese company, for example, and during the day in the office, as a subordinate of a manager, you would never badmouth or say your manager is wrong. However, that ba ma wa changes when you go out to drinks with the manager.
Yes,
you actually start telling off the manager, and it's like, oh, while we're out to drinks, because the basho, the space and the overall atmosphere has changed, the protocol has changed, and I can tell my manager off to a certain degree. And then the next day you come in, the spaces and the relationship has changed again. So it really, you know, the rules are going to kind of change depending upon what your situation is, etc. It doesn't, and sometimes, so I don't know if it's breaking the rules or the rules change, but it will depend on the situation. I thought it was a nice anecdote or story to tell.
Yeah, I think in general, Tony and I both lived in Japan, and we know each other for a long time, having lived in Japan more or less together, not in the same apartment, but we did a lot of things together. So, basho, the place. What place am I in? Ma stands for what again?
Space, or the relationship, like like the actual kanji is like a gate, like between each other. What's going on? Yeah.
And keeping a sense of harmony amongst people.
Yeah. So I mean, you may be in a bamawa of a forward-thinking startup company, but if you're not fitting that protocol, I almost say protocol, then you're not going to be as successful. Or the other way around, if I work in a bank, in a conservative bank, if I start breaking the rules, compliance is going to come down on me.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Excellent. So keeping yourself within the realm of the society or government and such offers you a lot in the long run, even if it seems to take away certain viability in the short run. And Japanese people are very, very hesitant to create conflict with each other. So thanks, Tony. I see Angel. You'd like to ask a question?
I really was I found it very positive. The positive swift to goodness from the negative thing that Vaughn started expressing, and how it turned into such a positive thing. It was like a light getting brighter and brighter, and I really loved that process. And I just want to acknowledge it.
Okay, yeah, I think so. I have a number of principles that I follow when I coach, and my guess is that, you know, pretty much every coach does, and maybe some of the principles I have I'm not even consciously aware of, but I still have them. And one of the things I believe in my clients often before they're believing in themselves. And I'm also believing that in about 90-something% of all instances, whatever's taking place is actually positive. No matter how painful it might feel at the moment, when we really settle into it, it's a good life-affirming lesson. So that what I do when people state their challenge, almost always, they state it in a somewhat negative way. And so one of the first things that I'm doing, Angel, is to think, okay, so X, Y, and Z happened. How could we restate that without taking away from the importance of what happened? How can we restate that and begin to turn it into a positive? And I think we have to usually do that step by step, because if I had just said to Vaughn right from the beginning, you know, you could turn this into a positive by boom, and I make my statement, it most likely doesn't at all pace where his feeling is at the moment. And one of the things that I was attempting to do was to nudge Vaughn to make the statements himself out of self-realization rather than making the statements for him. So, Angel, if I heard you correctly, you found it nice that we took a seeming negative and turned it into something that was rather positive, correct? Hello, Angel.
Might be on mute.
Maybe he muted himself, but I don't even see him. Let's see. Where is my friend Angel? That's funny. He doesn't even show up as being on the call anymore.
He's gone. He disappeared.
He disappeared.
Just
Well,
like an angel.
Just like there you go. Who said that?
Lawrence.
Lawrence, yes. Isn't that fantastic? He really good statement. And then he's gone. Okay, so I see Ian has his hand raised.
Hi guys, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. A great discussion, and Vaughn, thank you so much for sharing, your trauma with us. Is it possible for a moment to explore this premise, and taking almost Vaughn as a person out of it for a second, from the perspective of Aikido? And it was just a metaphor that I was building. I'm curious what your reaction to it is, Charlie, which is that I think the solution that you found was the Aikido solution, right? Which is kind of work with the government, right? That's the resolution that we found. But I'm curious what the psychological value of it is in looking at what that relationship was to begin with, meaning that basically Vaughn as the character and the government as the character was the enemy, right? That more or less was your enemy. And from an Aikido perspective, you made the conscious choice, and I'm not pointing fingers at you, but Vaughn, the Vaughn made a conscious choice to ignore the enemy almost, but harbor still a resentment towards the enemy out of, I'm imagining, a fear that the love that you had for your creativity could not be allowed to blossom under the guise of that fear. So the enemy was still there, but one turned one's back to the enemy, as opposed to one acknowledging the enemy, one finding love for the enemy, and one using the enemy's force to work with your creativity in order to build that from the beginning. Is that an incorrect analysis of Aikido? I mean, I'm guessing.
Okay, so you said a lot of stuff.
Uh-huh.
I found it really interesting. I noticed Vaughn, because I can see everybody in the little thumbnails. Vaughn was nodding his head a few times. And now I'm going to do my best. Well, I'll say, Ian, that I'm not certain what you just said, actually. Because it was so much, and it was spoken pretty quickly, like as a true New Yorker. I I say with a smile on my face, being a New Yorker. Something about
Fundamentally, what is the Aikido relationship in the initial premise of the problem? And if you need more detail, I'm happy to engage.
I'm not sure if this will answer you or not.
Uh-huh.
In Aikido, we believe that the person attacking us is really wanting more intimacy, more human contact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But in their misunderstanding of the world and themselves, they strive for that by, trying to punch you in the face or whatever. So we do our best to respect them, knowing that they actually want more human contact, and it's not violent human contact that they want. They want to be loved and accepted like everyone else. So the sense that I can make out of what you're asking at the moment is that I think, and again, I've done this hundreds of times, I think Vaughn lost appreciation for his adversary, lost respect for his adversary, lost a sense of caring for his adversary. And when you do that, you wind up in a fight.
And a metaphorical or literal castle built on that resentment that had to be pulled apart with your own hands, basically, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that.
Okay, I'd love to go on because I think this is happening, but we're a few minutes past our hour. So what I'm doing, and my schedule will be a little different over the holidays, not because of me, but because people get really caught up in Christmas and stuff. So we won't have another seminar until January. I will send you a link to this webinar once my good friend Tony does a little simple magic with it. And so that could be 3, 4, 5 days like that. I'd invite you to please come back to other webinars. If any of you would like to be coached, you can also send me a simple message saying I'd like to be coached either next time or one of these times. And what I'm hoping is that everybody is learning from these sessions, number one, about themselves, because I think that's most important. And then number two, you can be learning about how to coach or how to approach certain challenges. So I want to say thank you to Vaughn, because it definitely takes, I don't know, I could say, I think courage to say, yeah, let me talk about something I did that wasn't so great. And I think partially because Vaughn knows that chances are he's going to come away with he's going to be respected in the process and everything. So he comes away having a pretty good feeling, but it still takes some courage to stand up and say, basically, I made a mistake. And it's like, okay, brother, me too. So thank you, Vaughn. That's it for today. Again, hope to see you come back again. If you're really liking it, also, next time you get an email from me informing you of the next webinar, I'd really love it if you send it out to other people that might also have an interest. Okay, that's it for today. As we say in Thailand, Sawadee Krap, which can mean hello and goodbye. So I hope to see all of you again sometime.